Hi, this is Dr. Crawford bringing to you on YouTube the latest on the COVID pandemic and new developments with the vaccine. So the purpose of these short tutorials, if you will, or updates, is to help everybody be on board in terms of what's going on in the world of COVID and its fast-changing pace. So let's get started. So for this week, what I wanted to go over with you, first of all, are the statistics updated as of today, February 11th, and this material was obtained from the New York Times. And what you can see here is that it shows a number of cases total reported in the United States, which is 27.3 million. The number of deaths, we are up to 471,346 deaths. And as of February 10th, 76,979 people were hospitalized. Despite these very sobering statistics, we do see that we are on the way down. For now, that's good. You can see that for cases, we're down 36%, deaths are down 22%, and hospitalizations are down 27%, which is all good. And you can see that on the graph here. If you look at March of 2020, we certainly have had peak in January, and that's coming down quite nicely, and we can hope that that continues. There are some concerns about the various COVID variants that are now moving around the world. We'll talk about those in another update. Now, what I wanted to focus today was basically on very practical material. We're going to look at the vaccine issue. And I just wanted to give you an update as to what's going on in terms of vaccine administration. So currently we have providers administering the vaccine at about 1.56 million doses per day on average, which is a lot, but we have a lot of people in this country, so it's really a very, very challenging job. So we can see here that generally the trajectory is upward. We're hoping to keep this moving. It's not as high as it needs to be, but at about now we're at about 1.56 million doses per day. And as the stockpile increases in terms of availability and the delivery mechanisms are formalized and stabilized, hopefully this is going to go up. Now, what this shows us is, this is just, again, from the New York Times. I just wanted to show you an overview of the vaccine rollout in a state-by-state basis. I live in Connecticut, so we're in the dark green, which means that our statistics are fairly decent here. And you can see there's quite a bit of variation around the country as to the success of the rollout in terms of the delivery status for each of the states. So this is something that you can follow online, and you can keep track in terms of going to your state, your government, your local and state government websites in order to see how things are progressing and what stage your state is at. In Connecticut, we are finishing up with 1A, which were healthcare workers and individuals over the age of 75. Now we're moving into 1B, which is individuals 65 and older. And this, again, is just another countrywide document of the states that are involved in now, for the most part, vaccinating, in addition to healthcare workers, also older individuals. And here we see, again, the breakdown of above 60, the darkest color, which we see here in Kentucky. And then as we go lighter, we have the higher ages that are eligible only at this point. So again, it does vary on a state-by-state basis, and it's very important to keep current so that if you want to get a vaccine, when the availability is at your particular status, you're ready to go. Now, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about vaccines. This is the coronavirus vaccine tracker, which is available online for everybody to review. And it basically talks about the different vaccines. And with other programs here, I'm going to be going into the vaccines in greater depth. Today's just an introductory overview. But what you can see here is that currently we have a number of vaccines in different stages of development. So we can see that there are 4 vaccines currently that are approved for full use. And then there are other vaccines that are in different stages of development. So phase 1 is the earliest stage, where we're just looking at whether or not the vaccine is safe, very limited assessment. Phase 2, where we're looking at a larger group of individuals for side effects and potential efficacy, and then rolling it out if they pass phase 1 and phase 2 requirements. The vaccines move on to phase 3, where this is a larger scale clinical trial that is evaluated very carefully before moving on for authorization. Currently, we have 2 vaccines in the United States that are approved for emergency use authorization. So this is a newer designation by the FDA that involves simply looking at whether or not under the circumstances we should be pushing forward with a particular vaccine that normally would take a longer period of review. However, that being said, this has been an unprecedented effort, has been described by the media and by scientists throughout our levels of government and in the pharmaceutical industry, that these clinical trials have been done very rigorously, and potential side effects have been monitored very, very carefully, and every effort has been made to make sure that this vaccine is safe. So it is something that, in my opinion, has been done very well, and for that reason, I certainly would get the vaccine myself. So we do have some vaccines that didn't make it through. Either they don't show efficacy, meaning they're not providing the necessary levels of protection, or other issues, and those have been abandoned. So we have quite a few vaccines in the pipeline, but as I mentioned a moment ago, we're really, in the United States, dealing with only 2. So here's a list of the leading vaccines. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the first here is the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine. This is an RNA vaccine, an mRNA vaccine, and I'm going to be telling you in future programs here exactly how these vaccines work. But this is an mRNA vaccine, a new type of vaccine, which seems to be working very well. And it only takes a small portion of the virus, so you can't worry about getting COVID from the vaccine itself. Now, this vaccine is, depending on the location, either in phase 2 or 3 trials. Here in the United States, we have emergency use authorization. Okay, so that's one of the vaccines that's being distributed in the United States. The second is the Mrna vaccine, which is also an RNA-based vaccine, making only one protein from the virus and is not capable of causing disease by itself. Again, emergency use in the United States as well as several other countries. So these are the 2 vaccines that are in play in the United States right now. And they will be added, the group will become larger in the future, but right now that's where we are. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine also has been approved for emergency use in other countries, but not the United States, UK, the EU, etc., but not yet the United States. It is currently being evaluated by the US FDA, but no approval yet. So with respect to the 2 vaccines that are being used, the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna, they have a very high efficacy, which means that they've been shown to prevent infection in approximately 90% of individuals who are vaccinated. And so that's a very, very good statistic. Indeed, even if an individual were to contract the infection, there were no cases of very serious infections or hospitalizations associated with the clinical trial administration of these 2 vaccine formulations. Now, this shows you the extent of the different vaccines that are being used, and the Moderna, for example, and this shows the areas of the world where it's either been approved, which is quite limited at this point, or early limited or emergency use, which is certainly holding true for the U.S. So the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, as well as the Mrna, are approved for emergency use in the United States. Now, a little bit about the Mrna vaccine. The two vaccines are similar. I'm not going to go into great depth today about how they're put together for the interest of time, but I will tell you that in a future broadcast. These vaccines are mRNA vaccines. So a tiny snippet of the virus is encased in a package, and that's what's delivered. The one gene from the virus in its RNA form is injected into the body, and that stimulates the production of the spike protein in the body, and then the body mounts an immune response against it that has memory and therefore protection against an actual infection. So here the efficacy now has been documented up to 94.5%, which is excellent. The vaccine is administered in 2 doses approximately 4 weeks apart. Okay, and there's been some conversation as to, the timing of the second vaccine, how long it can be delayed. But the current approach in the United States is to stick to the regimen as close as possible. You should take note of the fact that if you receive the first dose, you are not protected against infection for the first 2 weeks. So I would wait the full 3 weeks before even thinking that there's any protection going on. And of course, you should always maintain safety standards, even if you've been vaccinated. The second would be approximately 4 weeks after the first intramuscular injection in the upper arm. Okay, so this is a vaccine that's been around since December. On December 18th, emergency use authorization was given for this vaccine, and it's been quite successful in terms of what we know so far, in terms of the efficacy and the duration of protection. We still don't know completely because we're just starting to administer the vaccine. But as soon as the months go by and individuals are checked for their levels of protection in terms of antibodies to the virus, we'll be able to get a sense for the duration of the response. But everything looks good so far. So everything is holding steady in terms of generating a good response, high efficaciousness, and so far, no evidence that there's a waning of the immune response, at least during the time frame that we are looking at here. So this again is the vaccine that is injected. It is as I said, a coronavirus vaccine that is an mRNA vaccine. And in the next segment of this, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how the vaccine works. I think it's important to understand how things work and how the body responds to it, and we'll be talking about that in greater detail. We're also going to talk about the variants of SARS-CoV-2 that are around now, which is a little bit concerning, but certainly we are dealing with them very well as a country and as a worldwide community in terms of the scientific efforts to develop vaccines, which will be useful against all forms of the virus. So when we're talking about the vaccine itself, this is what the virus would look like diagrammatically, and we can see that it has these little red spikes. These are the proteins on the surface of the virus that attach to the cells in the lung. And just this protein alone, so this is the red gene codes for this red protein. We snip that gene out and take that and package it into a vesicle, which keeps it stable, and inject it into an individual. And then inside the person's body, the RNA is used to make that particular spike protein only. And that is going to elicit the immune response. So there's no way of catching the disease or having the virus transmitted to you through this vaccine. So that's very, very important to understand. So what is done is that sort of an oily shell is put around that particular gene. So here's your spike gene in the form of RNA, and this is the lipid, it's called lipid or fat particle that surrounds the RNA, okay? And it requires, as I'm sure you've already heard, storage at very low temperatures, but they're improving on these packaging vehicles all the time. So this one is fairly stable. It's stable for up to 6 months when it's in a freezer, okay? So at any rate, this is what is given in the vaccine, and that's all. Okay, so it is very safe, and there have been few side effects. We're going to talk about those also coming up. But I do want to say that although the vaccine has been administered to millions of people now, there really has been no evidence that it has caused any mortality. A few severe reactions were noted, but for the most part, the vaccine appears to be quite safe. But we will review what has been documented in terms of potential side effects so that you get a better sense of, what to expect with the vaccine. The vaccine, again, as I mentioned, is injected twice, 28 days apart, and that is to prime the immune system. So you get a dose and then a booster that makes sure that the immune system mounts a very powerful response to the virus spike protein. And because the virus spike protein is what starts all the trouble in an infection, now you've got an army ready to go to attack that virus protein right away. We still don't know, again, how long the protection will last, but so far so good. Let's put it that way. And it's possible that over time the antibodies and T cells will drop that fight the virus. But right now we know that there are memory cells and T cells that can exist for long periods of time. And we would expect that to be the case, hopefully, for this particular vaccine. But again, we don't have solid data because the vaccine hasn't been around long enough. But we will be getting that data and we will keep you posted. So I will see you next week. It's been a pleasure, and I'm hoping that this is informative and enjoyable and answers some of your questions. So this is Dr. Crawford signing off.